Hey guys, hello everyone. Welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Good to see everyone again. Letting folks in here before we get started. Looks like we got a good turnout today. Hello to everyone out there on Facebook and YouTube as well. And got some interesting stories to explore today, especially the theme of taking old pianos and freshening them up in various ways. And I'll give official introduction in a moment here. Let's pull up my notes and let a few more people in. There we go, still arriving. Got this going. All right, perfect. All right, well, as a few more people roll in, I'll start the intro, the session, and then we'll roll into things. Should be kind of fun. So officially here, we are at Piano Tech Radio Hour. We gather here every Saturday to meet with and learn from the most fascinating and knowledgeable folks in the piano world. And, this can include manufacturers, rebuilders, musicians, makers of other instruments, and of course, piano techs. Our mutual goal here is to become better at our craft, to help each other, and create an ever more musical world together. Piano Tech Radio Hour is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, an online learning resource that brings you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. And if you'd like to keep up with us, attend every live session easily, support the future growth of this fine production, please subscribe at bit.ly/joinptrh, bit.ly/joinptrh. That's a quick link for you. We just had a masterclass with Chris Brown on regulation, as well as a French polish masterclass with Doug Gregg, a masterclass on steel frame piano design with David Clavins. And we'll be putting that information in the chat as we roll along today. Of course, we'll include a feedback link. We always appreciate our feedback. A link to subscribe to our podcast, where you can always listen to archival sessions of Piano Tech Radio Hour on your favorite podcast player. To get there, it's just pianotechradio.com. And you can go to the subscribe link there to see all the different platforms we're on. And while we're on the topic of Piano Tech Radio Hour podcast, I want to share with you a couple of things here. Let's see if I can pull up these stats real quick. So number one, we've been sharing this in our emails lately. If you check down at the bottom, we are charting in various countries in the category of performing arts podcasts on Apple. And so we've reached the top 200 top performing arts podcasts in the United States. And then they give you ranks also for other countries. And interestingly enough, we get to rank higher in other countries for whatever reason in that category of performing arts. And so I'll list them off. It's fun. And then I've got a fun follow-up. So in Great Britain, number 37, we've ranked that high. Canada, number 44. Germany, number 19. Norway, number 4 in performing arts. Ireland, number 6. Netherlands, number 13. Austria, number 3. Belgium, number 9. Slovakia, number 18. And I want to call particular attention to being the number 9, getting to the number 9 spot in Belgium as a performing arts podcast. A couple of fun things. Number one, we're working behind the scenes on potentially bringing in a guest from Belgium who's doing some cool work with straight strung pianos. Nothing solidified there, but we got the communication started, and it seems like things will move forward. And then on top of that, I received just this morning, probably someone else's evening, a wonderful message from a person named Antoine Michels. And they said, I want to read you this because it was just so great to hear. It says, together with my father, we work in this secondhand piano shop near Brussels, Belgium. I wanted to give my thanks to you and the people who work with you for all the efforts you put into organizing, airing, commenting all the Piano Tech Radio Hour and Masterclass content to which I am subscribed. As a person who was thrown into the business without any training and with minimal guidance afterwards, it was hard to understand the depth of the piano world. I learned most of what I know through trial and error, but I came to understand there is a limit to this way of learning. So recently I decided to explore and expand my understanding of pianos and discovered your podcast. It has been my starting point and an inspiration to drive me forward. Since then, I acquired books, more advanced, precise equipment, and it has made my job more interesting and enjoyable. And the most amazing thing is I now see a road forward, and I'm not sure I will ever be able to learn everything there is to learn, but I will aim to try. So to you, I say thank you. Those 2 words don't express all the gratitude I feel. I wish you all the best and hope to hear you out there for a long time. Still, kind regards, Antoine Michels at Piano Michels. So that was very touching to receive that message, and it makes it all that much more fulfilling to do the work we do here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. And of course, thanks to them for sharing their kind comments, and also thanks to everyone here for, helping to make it possible, whether you're a paying subscriber or you're just showing up to support and give your feedback and input, and be a part of the community. It all helps. And that's a reminder too, we put a little link in our emails that goes to a Vimeo video that will show you how to rate our podcast on iTunes, which is very useful. We don't have a ton of ratings, and I think but we do have some great ratings. I think part of that is because it is difficult to actually get through the process of rating a podcast on iTunes. And so, you know what, actually, I'll put this in the link right now. We made a little Vimeo video, which walks you through the steps to how to do it on your phone if you have the iTunes app. And so, you can give that a shot. So I'll put that in the chat there in the Zoom call. I'll put that in the chat out there on the socials. And then we'll start to walk into the episode. Today, I've got a few topics on the agenda that I think are going to be pretty fun. Number one, we've got Doug Gregg coming into the session. And part of the reason for that is because he's got a masterclass coming up on Thursday on nicks and dents. And sorry, there's some people that need to be let in here. Let me make sure that's happening. And he's got a lot of great techniques. He's been doing this for many, many years. He's worked not just in pianos, but in, furniture refinishing and, vehicle refinishing and refurbishing motorcycles and cars and things like that. So he's a doctor of veterinary medicine. So he brings in all this sort of interesting experiences, all the way from all these sort of mechanical skills to, understanding of chemistry and scientific method and all that great stuff. So it's always fun to hear from Doug. He calls himself the classic piano doc. So what we'll probably do is start off just talking to him for a little bit, ask him kind of what we should look forward to in the masterclass coming up. I'll share the link in case you guys want to sign up. And then there'll probably be some time left. I want to go into a couple things. We have acquired my company, Floating Piano Factory, which has one locus in New York City and another in the Chicago area. We have just acquired 2 pianos. And to be honest, over the years, it's been, over 10 years, 20 years, depending on how you count it, since I've been in the piano industry. I actually haven't spent a lot of time acquiring pianos to do anything interesting with them. I probably acquired a total of 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6, if you like stretch it to include various situations. But just kind of felt like getting more into it lately and made a couple of acquisitions that are kind of interesting and would love to share it with you guys. Not just to kind of put them in front of you, get your opinion, one, just take a look. It's kind of fun. But number 2, love to source from the community ideas on how to approach this. You could be, hey, Ethan, you just got a couple lemons, get rid of them. And, you could say, oh, wow, you got a lot of work ahead of you, whatever. I'd love to kind of present everything to you and see what you think. So we will get into that. And I hope this is not somebody calling me, telling me they can't get into the session. That happens every once in a while. Anyways, let's hop in and start talking to Doug. And while we do that, I'll make sure and find the link to his masterclass so everybody can sign up. Oh, but before I say that, just want to refresh, and so everybody knows, we've built a habit now, which we hadn't had before. We were kind of just like being pretty extemporaneous with how we created the master classes throughout the year. One year we did a convention, another year we did one kind of every other month, but there wasn't like a specific rhythm to it. So now we do a master class every third Thursday of every month throughout the year. So you can look forward to that. As a Craftsman subscriber, you can attend live, you can get access to the recordings, and Doug's is one of those very master classes, and the ones that I mentioned previously today, with David Clavins or Chris Brown, as well as Doug's other master class, are just kind of part of the fun there of what you can get involved with. So let me spotlight myself here, and I'll also bring up Doug, and we'll get started chatting with him. The Zoom box a little unwieldy here. Okay. It's good to see all these people joining. A lot of fun today. Hey, Doug, how you doing?
Very good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
It looks like in short sleeve shirt today. It must be warmer in Chicago.
It's getting warmer. It's been beautiful lately, I have to be honest, just to be able to go outside and get some fresh air, walk around.
You have fresh air? That's unique.
Yeah, it's fresher than New York. I hear New York is quite
it's clear out on Eastern Long Island now. But we did have a bit of smog.
Yes, I heard that. And it's all from like Canada fires, is that correct?
Yeah, from Nova Scotia.
Wow.
Circulate counterclockwise down through the New England states, all the way down to Washington. Yeah.
Wow, that's a big deal. Well, I guess with the smog, it's a bit concerning, but at least you're safer than the people that are sitting right next to the fire. Yeah.
Getting to what Montana gets every year.
Yes. Yeah. So have you been traveling, Doug? Is that correct?
I was in Northern California for almost 2 weeks.
Oh yes, I remember this. You attended an event. I don't want us to get too sidetracked, but I love this topic. So every year in Philadelphia, there's this event, which I told you about, called the Kensington Kinetic Sculpture Derby. And I love this. This is just like totally up my alley. So they take, they say you have to make something basically that runs on a bicycle, but it looks like a piece of art. And so the wildest ones I've seen where it was literally guys on the back of a flatbed truck, but they had like 6 bikes on the back of the truck. So instead of being run by gasoline, it was like 6 guys pedaling bicycles and running like a flatbed truck down the road, and do all sorts of fun stuff, everything down to just you're wearing a costume and riding a bike. You go through a mud pit at the end. It's just kind of like a fun, creative thing. But you said in California where you did something similar, right?
Yeah, in Eureka, that's, I think, where it's all started about 25 years ago. So yeah, there were some pretty neat events. This year, they didn't do the water part of the event where the devices have to cross a good sized inlet in the past from the salt water. So this was all on land this time, but it was pretty neat. There were some pretty interesting things. Some of them were like you just mentioned, 6 people propelling a fairly heavy float versus a single guy with what looked a little like sort of like a bicycle with a big slick on the back, and the whole thing flexed in the middle, and he had a crankshaft driving this tire, the rear tire, by flexing the bike up and down. Pretty creative.
Yeah.
Anyway, he flexed it up and down, the wheel would turn.
I feel like this has been one of my fantasies to enter into one of these things, right? And I did, but it was just me with a costume on a bicycle. I tried to rope my friends into it. They weren't into it. I bet I could rope you into it, Doug, with all your mechanical skills. Maybe we could build a piano contraption.
If I lived in Northern California, I think I'd participate.
All right. Well, I'll be calling you up about that. But so yeah, tell us about the Nicks and Dents class on Thursday. Very excited about it. What can people expect?
Okay. Well, I think it's the greatest business builder there is. what's the number one thing that most players care about their piano?
Right.
You'd be
I was going to say the way it looks, right?
how it looks. Really, not even how it sounds necessarily. That's number two, but how it looks. So many times I've come into a house and usually it's a woman. She's almost in tears because in one case they had a wedding in the house and they put all the gifts on top of the piano and dragged them across the top of her near a new Yamaha and had all kinds of scratches. Or another lady who just moved it an upright Steinway from one room to another and dinged the arm on it, and she was just couldn't believe it. And she just drove her nuts and couldn't even play the piano because she had to look at it. So yeah, it's and you can be a superhero by fixing those and making that disappear.
Mm-hmm. It's something important to recognize. I mean, I think it's one of those things. I've been in multiple domains like you have, right? And I've noticed there's a trajectory as you get into a topic area. So number one, when you're a beginner, you learn all of the things that kind of characterize you as an aficionado in the domain, be it science or, pianos or whatever. And then also there's nerds in the domain that have this sort of these things that categorize them as the aficionados as well. And I'll say what I mean by this. It's that characteristic of saying, all that I care about is what the piano sounds like. I'm a true musician, right? I care about the sound. I'm making sound recordings, Yes, you can give me something with scratches or whatever, but I just care about the sound, or especially if I'm a piano tuner, right? Because that's what I'm focused on, my ear, right? And the same thing goes for like being a scientist, right? Oh, I just care about the numbers and the data, right? I just care about the logic, and the emotional side of things doesn't really matter to me too much. But so there's that part of it's great. That part of it sort of classes you among the passionate few about that particular category. But then you almost have to, along the way, learn about the way that other people see the world in order to exist in that domain. So to be a great scientist, you have to also be able to communicate your knowledge to the public, which means you might have to like frame things with a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of emotion, right? And same thing with pianos. You have to understand, as sad as it may seem to us, people care sometimes more about the way their piano looks than the way it sounds. But you work with that, right? And you appreciate it.
I'd like to add, there's a lot of technicians that, I'm going to turn some old saws on their head here in a few minutes, but some are more impressed with impressing other technicians than they are about even making this piano sound as good as they can be. So you got to keep everything in perspective. My goal, number one, is to get the most sound out of a piano that I restore, and I've restored over 100, and for the least amount of effort and expense, so that I can pass that along to the buyer. And if you're in a market that's not real high end, that's pretty essential. So we had a little brief discussion about your Mason and Hamlin and what could be done to it. And what I like to do is get the biggest bang for the buck, and without the most labor. And there's some things that I just don't believe in doing. And I don't think that most pianos need a new soundboard. And there are some people that really think that most pianos do need a new soundboard. But one of the reasons, scientific reasons I can put out there, is that Yamaha is currently working on a way to age their soundboards so that they sound better. They're roasting them at 450 degrees Fahrenheit to try to age them like the pianos from the 30s that other technicians are saying, oh, those soundboards are too old, they have to be replaced, with nothing wrong with it. So
Right.
I don't do that. And I also avoid, frankly, I avoid buying pianos that have had their soundboard replaced unless I can test them out first. And I do get a fair number of pianos from Ohio shipped to me from a buyer out there, but if it's replaced soundboard, I take a pass because I've seen about I'd say 25-30% of the replaced soundboards didn't sound as good as an equivalent original piano, even with a crack in the board.
Yeah, that's interesting. And also, we do also have another masterclass. I'll see if I can dig up the link for it, which Del Fondrick did, which I think is a really great one to consume for anyone, especially that's thinking about things this way. So Del is a great kind of scientific thinker as well, and he developed this technique to refurbish soundboards, in which you use epoxy, right? And you use epoxy.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
developed it independently, but yeah, I use G-Flex by West System, which is a flexible epoxy that will give you about 10 to 20% stretch. So when the soundboard expands and contracts, it doesn't just crack off again, which, you know, I've seen repairs that were glued, shimmed and glued, and a year or two later, the shim cracked open. So what's the point? But if the epoxy can stretch a little, it can stay attached, and you can do a cosmetic repair, which most of the time that's all that's needed, because that's the reason people shim soundboards for the most part, is for cosmetics. You can even airbrush over the repair, and it's almost invisible. So I did that on one, not one that I repaired, but someone else had repaired that was really ugly. It was a good repair with dowels, but it had all these dowels and sticking through the soundboard, and really probably that's why I ended up with that piano, because nobody would buy it. So I ferreted it out and airbrushed it with a matching wood color, that's another subject that's kind of hard to come by. It's almost safety orange, believe it or not, the color of the soundboard. Anyway, I airbrushed that out, and nobody notices it, and it sounds fine. So,
Yeah, I mean, my understanding with soundboard cracks is, you know, probably one of the biggest issues is if it buzzes, if you've got a buzz because of the crack, and maybe some sort at the edges of it, or there's some resonances that happen with the strings, things like that. Yeah.
9 times out of 10, that is because of the crack necessarily. It's because the soundboard has separated from the ribs down below. So if you reattach and glue the rib to the soundboard, even with a crack there, especially big cracks, they almost never buzz, because their two surfaces are so far apart they couldn't touch each other. You know, I have a concert pianist who's about 85 years old, and we were looking at pianos for the church, and we got in discussion about cracked soundboards, and she said, "Oh, I've played some of the best pianos where you could read the newspaper through those cracks." Really, and Steinway is years ago even did the proof of that. They built a 7-foot or 9-foot Steinway, recorded it, then took the strings out, ran a skill saw through the soundboard, put it back together, and recorded it again, and you couldn't tell the difference. They put a slot all the way through the soundboard the whole length, and it didn't make a difference in the sound. So I repair them in various ways. One,
So tell us that, I don't know if we'll be able to source that, but that's an interesting story. Where would we go look that up? Is that sort of like apocryphal, you know, like, yeah, where did that come from?
I learned it from a guy that worked at the factory.
Okay.
who was my mentor.
Okay, so we'll take it. We can't prove it. We can't prove it, but we'll take it on advisement with a grain there because there's no evidence. But I would.
There's a couple of histories of Steinway that I think it probably is there.
It might be there. Okay. Yeah, it'd be interesting to find that too. I mean, my sense is that given the sort of technical understanding of the soundboard, you might lose some of the low end resonances because you wouldn't have the integrity of the board at that particular place. I don't know. I mean, it depends on.
I think the crack will do that, but I'll tell you that a bad repair can do that. I had one piano in my shop that had been re-glued, and the soundboard had lifted off of the ribs. And by the way, I just saw this repair in the last journal, PTG journal, which I probably should write comment about it. But they took Gorilla Glue that foamed and filled that space between the rib and the soundboard. What happened in this particular piano, it had been epoxied between the rib and the soundboard with a gap. Filled the gap. It was solid. It was tight. All of the A's were weak. I had to voice them significantly up to pretty much to the max to get all the A's to have the right amount of voice, enough power. It was in a particular spot in the soundboard that's where the A's resonated. It was pretty much right in the middle.
Yeah.
But if you do it right, and I've got a couple ways to press the soundboard down to the rib when you're gluing it. One of them is using toggles that are used for sheetrock. You know, the wing toggles that flip out. I wish I had a picture of it here, but you can put the 1/4-inch screw down through between strings, let the wings flip out under the strings, and then as you turn the screw down, the wings start pressing upward against the bottom of the strings and pressing downward on the board. You get the picture? So you're using the strings as a backup to push the soundboard back down and then re-glue it. So on a Grand, I'll tip a Grand on its side, put 4 or 5 of those toggles through the strings with little rubber caps on the tip of the screw so they don't make any mark. Push the soundboard down as I'm gluing it and let the glue set. Take the toggles back out, and it's a nice tight soundboard. Also use screws. There's special screws, 2 special screws I use. One of them is called the pocket screw. It's for building cabinets where you're burying the head of the screw at a 45-degree angle and tying a cross piece of the framing to the vertical part of the framing. Anyway, they're built-in washer head screws with no threads for about 3/8 of an inch, and then it's got some rather coarse wood screw threads on the end, and it's perfect for repairing soundboard because you can put it through the soundboard from the top. These will be removed later if you want to, but you put it through the top. It doesn't grab the soundboard, but it grabs into the rib down below. And these 1-inch pocket screws are just the right length to go almost to the other side of the rib, and that washer head pulls the soundboard down tight against the rib. And if you glue it, you put those screws in, tighten up the screws, let it set. You can take the screws back out later if you want to. So, and the other is finished.
Nick Latursky says, do you drill a hole first?
They're self-drilling. Their tips are have a drill bit like cut out of them, so that it looks a little like a drill bit. So they cut their own bits. The bit cuts its own hole. And another screw that's also pretty nice for that, you can do from below through the ribs, is finish screws. These are really tiny Torx head screws, tiny head that vary sort of like a finish nail does. So I put them in at a 45-degree angle, going both ways through the rib, and they're 1.25 inches. So by putting them at an angle through the rib into the board, they usually don't come out through the top of the board, but it pulls the board down onto the rib very tightly, and it buries the head, and then you can just fill the hole like you would fill a finish nail hole, because it's got such a small head. So those methods work great in repairing soundboards, and filling the gap in is kind of the second thing to do in the soundboard. And I'll put tape underneath on a grand piano. I'll put tape like Mystic tape all along the crack, and then with a syringe and an 18-gauge hypodermic needle, working through the strings without removing the strings, you can run a bead of the G-Flex epoxy into that crack. The tape underneath keeps it from running out the other side, and fill it just exactly level, and it pretty much disappears. It looks more or less like a shim. If you want to really make it disappear, you can airbrush it away too, and you don't even have to remove the strings to airbrush. You can airbrush right through the strings and then wipe the strings off.
And the liquid of the epoxy is such a consistency that it will kind of settle with like a flat top.
That G-Flex takes hours to set, so it levels itself. If you've leveled the piano before you start, it will fill almost perfectly, and it doesn't shrink. So that's good.
So this is all great stuff, and I should shortly. I have a little slideshow, so I'll share a little bit about the actual pianos that I have too, and of course this will be. We wanted to bring Doug on to give. Maybe we'll ask for a little bit more on the nicks and dents thing, but this will be an open discussion today as we talk about the pianos that we have on hand here, and I'll give you guys a look at them and we'll discuss them a little bit. But why don't you take a minute and tell folks a little bit more about the class and the format that's going to happen on Thursday, while I pull up this presentation and get prepared for showing people.
Okay. Well, I've been repairing furniture, antiques, and such for, I hate to even mention how long, about 65 years. My mother collected antiques, and I started restoring antiques when I was 12 years old for her, and learned a lot of tricks from a lot of masters, and developed some of my own. And I'll be passing some of that along. Some of that I've adapted from the automotive industry, using epoxy like Bondo is used in cars for filling dents. And then the stock and trade of this is the professional materials made by Koenig that I really love. They're extremely easy to use, very reliable. Colors are real good matches to real wood colors, which I've found not to be the case with most other companies' colored fillers. So I'll demonstrate how to fill dings, and then how to grain them in so they look like veneer without having to replace veneer. Replacing veneer is really problematic. Unless you have a huge collection of old veneer, it's almost impossible to get a good match. But I can give you almost a perfect match by faux finishing. So it just disappears. Like one example that you'll see Thursday, a friend of mine who I sold a 1932 Steinway to had a Dutch wardrobe in his living room that was his grandmother's, dating back to 1780 or so. And it had some really botched up repair in near a hinge and a couple other splits in the veneers, missing veneers. And I'm still in the process of doing repairs on that, but I've demonstrated in this upcoming presentation how to replace about 2 square inches of missing veneer and make it look like it was never gone. So,
Yeah, and I have to say, there's a piano store near me here in Elmhurst, Illinois. It was in business for 40 years. Father started it, and the son was running it, and 2 sisters were working as admins. Long story short, the father and son passed away within the past 10 years or so, both, and they were kind of like the main business owners. And now the sisters are running it, and I've been interfacing with them recently. But also then there's people that they've been working with that did rebuilding or refinishing or whatever, and they've either retired, or gone on to other places, and they cannot find refinishers, right? They can't find people to do these things, nicks and dent repair or whatever. And I try to do some helping them, just like contact local furniture refinishers and things like that, see if they want to build a relationship. But some of them don't want to necessarily touch pianos per se, because that's just not their domain. So I have to agree with you that there's really an empty spot here, and if you get these skills together, especially I've seen some of your presentations, there's some really simple techniques, and people have their different things that they appreciate about the instrument. There's the sound, and then there's also the furniture, and it matters to people, and it's worth money to be able to do that stuff to them, right?
the first guy I saw do this was when I was about 15. My mother had a Duncan Fife dining room table, and I think a candlestick fell over and made a deep gouge right in the middle. And she just was beside herself about that. And I think she went through a moving company, found a guy who did hot shellac repairs, and he did a hot shellac repair on that table, and I was really impressed. It just disappeared. So I just filed that in the back of my mind for many years until my brother really put me onto the Koenig materials, Koenig system, which is like hot shellac, but much more forgiving. He's also a PhD biologist who's down into woodworking in his retirement. Anyway, he put me onto those materials. I watched videos from the Koenig company online, and thought, this stuff really looks good. I got a set of the hard waxes and started practicing with it, practicing on pianos that I own. So I usually have about 20 pianos in the shop that are mine. So I can do whatever I want with them. If I mess up, it's my problem. So I recommend you get some things to practice on it. And sometimes those are cast off things for yard sales. And some of the demonstrations I'll give on Thursday are cast off pieces of wood. One of them is actually a piece of wood that I did pick up from a junk shop, but it was a piece of dark wood that I could do a demonstration on. But I'm going to start with the very simplest thing is just light scratches, work up to heavier, deeper scratches down to the wood, and then go on to gouges and missing veneer. So all aspects of it, and the scratches are just so simple to fix that it's almost hard to charge for it. I mean, I can fix scratches on a piano sometimes in 3 or 4 minutes. So
right, yeah, and there's a lot of things like that we do as piano technicians that don't take a lot of time, but there's 2 sides to it. One, man, nobody else can do it, you know, and then and then also, the time and energy that you put into learning how to do it, and how valuable it is to the client. So yeah, it's really fascinating. Well, I think that's probably enough just so we get some other stuff on the class. Why don't I pull up a little presentation I put together on this piano that we acquired, and we'll just take a look at it. So let me go to presentation mode. We'll go to presenter view, present. Okay, and then we're going to pop this, enter full screen. Let's see here. Pop this over on my other screen, and we'll go back. Oh, come on. Where is it? Present. Okay. Sorry, give me 1 second here.
While you're looking for that, I'll mention another interesting one.
Yep.
If you are looking for a Nick and Dan person in your area, do check with moving companies, but they don't always have one. And the local moving company contacted me because they did a move of a whole bunch of furniture from the local historical society, knocked off some carving off of one of the pieces, and lost it. And they called me to see if I could fix it. I was able to reproduce it from a matched carving on the other side of the piece that was the same, and ended up developing a technique for copying carving. And I published that about 2 years ago in the Guild Journal on how to do that. Making a mold, casting it in epoxy, and putting it on.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to this class on Thursday. Sorry, I've been a little bit distracted trying to pull the presentation up here.
Perfect.
And then the link to subscribe to that's in the chat. We've been sharing it in our emails and stuff as well. But yeah, let's take a look here. I mean, first I thought, hey, why not do just like a brief history of Mason and Hamlin as we get in and look at this piano. It's always good to get some context. And again, I'm sure folks in the audience will have even more than I have on that kind of stuff. But Mason and Hamlin, this company was established in Boston in 1854 in Massachusetts. Henry Mason, Emmons Hamlin. They gained a reputation for producing high quality instruments, but actually they started by entering the musical instrument industry, producing the organ harmonium, a reed operated instrument known for its ability to imitate various orchestral sounds. It wasn't until 1881 they expanded their manufacturing endeavors to include pianos. Interesting analog there with Lyon and Healy, who we talked about in a previous session, that they did not start in pianos. They started in sheet music. And this is the Mason and Hamlin Model A. So just briefly, Mason and Hamlin Model A was introduced as a smaller grand piano option late 19th century, became immensely popular due to its sound quality and versatility. It was highly regarded for its ability to produce rich, resonant tone comparable to larger grand pianos, while its compact size made it suitable for smaller spaces. And it's it's under 6 foot length piano, usually I think in the range of 5'10" or so, 5'8" to 10 or something, 5'7" maybe. But yeah, so you're not looking at a full 6 foot grand, but kind of a nice little piano that can fetch a good amount of money, multiple tens of thousands of dollars if it's in really good condition, or at least multiple thousands of dollars in the case that it's not in great condition, but it's still a fine instrument. So this is the instrument that came to our attention, and thanks to a community member actually said, hey, Ethan, I know a guy who's picking up some antiques from an estate, and they found this piano, and I thought you might be interested. And we said, okay, well, we'll go take a look at it. So this is in New York, in a really cool apartment actually in Soho, that this woman had been living there since the 60s, basically. And it's covered in some books, and you can see all the kind of artifacts in the area, but it looks like a pretty good piano from the outside. And I'll briefly, so we can have at least a little bit of time for discussion on it, I'll just briefly go through some photos that we have on hand. Clearly some strings have been replaced. Clearly it's a bit dusty and dirty, and some kind of things caught in there, and there's a bunch of gummy dirt there around the pins, and the cleaning looks like it'll be a job, and there'll still be some residue and stuff like that. Really be interested to hear people's opinions there. I did actually, I have a little screenshot of the Pierce piano, I think, on this, but I don't know if it's in the presentation. I'll see if I can find it. So strings are still there, doing okay, but getting corroded and dusty and rusty and stuff like that. Clearly an animal of some sort's been hanging out. Maybe the cat liked to lay on the piano strings when it was open at one point. Now, I don't think this piano had been tuned for about, I think they said 7 years. An interesting aspect of the piano is that when we went to go check it out, it actually didn't sound that far out of tune, which was a really good sign, just from the get-go on the stability of the instrument, right? The viability of instrument, the quality of the pin block and the pin, the pins, sizing of the pins and things like this. You can see, as we discussed, there's a bit of cracking in the soundboard at various places. It doesn't look terribly dried out and decrepit. I don't know what's going on with the ribs there. As Doug mentioned, there might be some separations or something, but we can listen to the piano in a future clip and see what we think. There's that tension resonator that Mason Hamlin is well known for. The action is clearly used up quite a bit, dusty, dirty. We'll see in a future section that some of the hammerheads are actually loose, in addition to just kind of being a little bit old and used up on this action. So, strings have been replaced in the treble and the bass, things like that. You can get a good look at things. And it looks like, I don't know, we could get some opinions on this in terms of, these do look like a different type of pin here. And so maybe these lowest bass strings had all been replaced at one time. It looks like they had been systematically replaced. I don't know. Maybe somebody could provide an opinion on whether that is indeed evidence of just replacing those strings. And I'm not exactly sure why this is here. What is that? I don't know if we can zoom in very easily. Some kind of, maybe it's just a piece of tape to mark something on that string. Maybe there's an issue with it. Maybe somebody marked it. You can see the cracks there. You can see the debris. All right, here's some bullet points. I reached out to the community a little bit and got some feedback. Anonymously, I'll share some opinions and ideas. Mason Hamlin, generally considered worth rebuilding. It does have a good tone as an instrument, potentially. And I thought I had a video here. Maybe we'll get to it after the comments. Rebuilding requirements, could include bridge capping, pin block replacement, new action parts, hammers, restringing, refinishing, stuff like that. Soundboard in okay condition, we could replace it. The rebuilding could cost, if you do all the things mentioned here, replacing pin block, soundboard, action parts, you can get in the multiple tens of thousands of dollars. And I can report that we did acquire this piano we are requiring this piano for around $1,000. I did, though, to my chagrin, find out that it needs to be moved out through a window.
Oh.
So we'll see how that happens. That I found out kind of after I got in on the deal. So we'll see. And here's some other opinions. So we have pins that are holding well. So we might replace strings and use 3/0 pins and sort of clean and spray the plate in its place. The soundboard might be able to be shellacked instead of replaced, checking for loose ribs and glue. In the bridge, perhaps we could find reparable cracks and pulling loose pins, reinserting with some epoxy. So this is more along the lines of, let's kind of work with what we have and don't go too deep down the rabbit hole, which is also aligned with our experience level too at this kind of thing. Arla strings recommended, Ronson Weichert hammers could be done for a good cost. Dampers might be nice to improve the overall quality of sound. And, we could look at the piano deeper to really get down and dirty on that. And seems like a strong candidate, but a second opinion that it could be a strong candidate for rebuilding. And, maybe we don't want to go too deep on the soundboard pin block stuff, because it might not be required. I guess I'll just get into this photo because it's here. Here's the other piano we acquired. We're not gonna have a lot of time to discuss this stuff. Maybe we'll bring it up on another session, or continue the discussion and online or something. But this is the other piano we acquired, a little player piano, Pianola. This one was, a woman was like desperately trying to get rid of it. She called me. I kind of turned it down at first, but it was such a good deal, and she seemed so adamant that I should take it, that we picked this thing up. And I think, in the end, it's very inexpensive to move. We got all these piano rolls along with it. It's 64 keys, so it's pretty light and easy to move around, although it does have all the equipment inside. And, the cabinet's in pretty good shape too. It's not like it's a beat up instrument. And it's functional. Now, so I have to say, it was very hard to pump this. You have to pump the pedals to push air through the vacuum system to run an instrument like this. And it was very difficult, and it still is very difficult to pump. But we did find something out after some investigation. There's these little holes in the piano roll in the paper. And what happens is there's a device behind the roll that can detect which hole air is being pulled in through suction. And that's what drives the whole system to decide which key to play. And apparently you can change which pitch on this particular piano. You can go down two half steps or up 2 half steps. And what was happening was, we didn't realize the holes on the roll was in between half steps. And so it wasn't doing a great job of communicating the information of which keys to play, and also making it more difficult to play. And so some potentially good news there. We got it functioning more easily.
Oh, cool.
And here's some of that loose hammer demonstration on the Mason and Hamlin. And here's a Mason and Hamlin. Let's get a little audio on that. Yeah, hey, listen, it hasn't even been tuned. I have to say, if that's the only piano I could have, man, I'd enjoy playing that thing. Tune it up. Not too bad. So
Ethan, did all the notes tune okay in that slip?
on the Mason and Hamlin?
On the Mason Hamlin, yeah.
We didn't try tuning them all, I don't think. I think maybe he just tuned a few just to test it out. So that remains to be seen.
If you can get them to hold a little, I think the pin block would probably be fine with 3/0 pin. That pianola, that's a late model player. It must have an electric vacuum pump in it.
So it does. We're looking into, so basically, and clearly maybe we'll come back to this on another episode. I'll review this stuff because there's a lot to talk about. But when you plug the piano in, it blows a fuse.
Oh, okay.
So I think the vacuum motor, which we just, we were like, is it a motor? Is it a vacuum? What is it? Right. It's a vacuum motor. And so it's literally like what's inside your vacuum. The whole system is run by air running through tubes. It's crazy. It looks like spaghetti. I'm sure some of us have seen this. It's quite a kludge, and it's fascinating that this used to be the state of the art. And so the motor doesn't work and there's a little box, a little wooden, it's all crammed in there because it's not only is it a player system with all this junk, it's a micro piano. And so all the mechanisms just crammed to the edge inside of the piano. I'm sorry, I don't have photos of that, but we'll share that maybe later. And there's a little box, which clearly is where that, what's that?
I had one of those, and it was kind of an oversized spinet like that one. I ended up selling it to a restaurant. They used it in a bar, charged to play a role, and I think a bit of money at it. But they are crammed full of equipment, and probably you got a rotten cable or a mouse is chewed on the electric cable down inside. It's probably pretty simple fix.
But you think it might just be the cable itself? Maybe if we just chose a different cable.
Rotten insulation or mouse is chewed it.
Okay. All right. Well, I will say we'll investigate that, and thank you for that.
About a 1960 something piano, so it's not that old.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's in good shape. I mean, if you play that piano, just play the keys. Luckily, it's very functional. Like you can play the piano and it plays. It doesn't have a lot of crazy action issues. Of course, not perfect, but it plays pretty darn well considering. And thank goodness, because if you had to go in there and regulate or something, I don't know. So we'll talk about it, I guess, maybe on a future session. You know, how much to do surgery, how much to just go with what we have. You know, cable. Do we have to replace a motor? You know, that kind of stuff. But given how functional it is, it may be the case where you don't try to do too much and let it work as it works. I will say we looked inside, and from the visual field, there was one. I literally only saw one of these little tubes that had you could see it had it was broken, right? The other ones didn't really look that bad, you know, as bad as I've seen other pianos. There's like this weird, almost like a goo around the tubes, whatever chemicals they're made of kind of deteriorate. But
you might be lucky, because this is a fairly late model, that the quality of the rubber is not too bad.
Right.
When I had one of those in my shop, it played and it was fun to fool with, but nobody was interested in buying it except that one restaurant. So I was happy to sell that one and get it out. But they are difficult to work on. You have to take a lot of equipment out to get at the strings if you got a broken string or you need regulation. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, I think there's some interesting cases, and it's a novelty item, right? So there's certain places where it goes where it's the sort of energy and entertainment value of, hey, look at this old thing and what we can do with it. And it, yeah, I guess we'll talk about it in a future episode. We went through the thought process, and like removing the player system, given its functionality, doesn't seem like a great idea, right? Like, yes, you could still have this be kind of a piano that's functional, but it seems to be worth more with an okay functioning player system than without it, and it's just the piano. You know, in some cases people remove it, but
an oversized spinet that nobody will want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. Well, we're basically at the end of the hour here. So I thought we'd have time for lots of different stuff, but we got to check in with Doug. So I appreciated that. And you shared a lot more than, than about the Nixon dents repair, and almost did a pre-discussion on this type of piano and the kind of things you could do. So, we'll bring these topics up on another session. It sounds like it's worth chatting through, and people might have even more opinions and insights to share, and something to learn from the situation. And I'll also have the opportunity to collect some more data on the player piano, because I think that'll be very interesting. We can show you guys the inside of it and the functionality of it, and sort of explain some of the stuff we learned about it. But what I didn't get to say, because you were talking about the cable, the motor, if you have to replace it, it's inside of this black box, literally inside of the piano, which the tight to take the screws off of the box to access the motor to replace it, the tightness of the you can't even like get to the screws to like take the screws out to take the box apart and all this stuff. So I hope you're right, Doug, that it's just a cable.
Yeah, fun to work on, but mice do like to get into those things because they're cozy.
I saw a little bit of a mouse nest, I think, in the corner. So at one time they might have had a nice little home there, but I don't know, they did too much damage, which is nice. Yeah. All right. I think we're gonna have to call it for today, but it's been a really fun one. I'll make sure and read our outro. Any final words from you, Doug?
Word of wisdom: don't put too much into that player. A little fun with it.
I think it's a flipper.
Move it along.
I have to say we're having fun with it. So there's that entertainment value of just being able to have a player piano. But yeah, I think it's kind of flipping it over as quickly as possible and not trying to do too much. But all right, I'll put some links in the chat. Of course, how you can sign up for all of our different offerings. I'll make sure there's a link for Doug's class. Let's see here. And I think, I think that's all in there. That's all in the links. And then of course, celebrating Piano Tech Radio Hour, make sure you go to subscribe there. And we got some fun fans in Belgium and everything popping around the world. Make sure to go leave us a review. I put the Vimeo link in the chat earlier about how you can do that. That's about it. We'll come back on these topics later. So officially, we have reached the end of another musical journey here at Piano Tech Radio Hour. Thanks to everyone for joining, especially Doug for coming up and sharing some things today. Looking forward to his class. As always, we're brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, cutting edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. For those of you that joined us today by signing up for this session, you can make your life more convenient. You could subscribe to Piano Tech Radio Hour. Right now, it's just $16 a month. You get the recording of today's session in a member area, automatic registration for each week's new session. Sign up at bit.ly/joinptrh. That's bit.ly/joinptrh. And we'll see you all again next week. Thanks for being here.